Prince Eirik glares menacingly, declaring that Arialaine's recent conduct has crossed a dangerous line. Unfazed by the royal authority, Arialaina calmly demands clarification from Prince Eirik. The prince explodes in absolute fury, screaming her name across the tense hall. He viciously accuses her of orchestrating targeted harassment against Count Norrell's daughter and her inner circle. Furious, Eirik condemns her disgraceful attempts to feign ignorance in the face of overwhelming guilt. He rattles off her grotesque crimes, including sending a terrifying blade to Claudia and leaving mutilated animal corpses for her friends. Scoffing at her arrogance, the crown prince demands to know if she truly believed her twisted actions would go unnoticed. Cornering her with absolute certainty, he screams Arialaine's name as he finalizes his damning accusation. A heavy, suffocating silence crushes the hall as the accusation hangs in the air. Arialaina stands perfectly resolute, her expression unyielding as she silently processes the prince's frantic outburst. Shattering the quiet, she boldly steps forward and asserts that she has never uttered a single falsehood in her entire life. Tension crackles through the stifling air as the stunned crowd waits with bated breath for her next words. Refusing to cower behind a veil of false ignorance, she coldly admits to possessing direct recollection of the gruesome events. Eirik sneers at her expected defiance, but Arialaina instantly cuts him off with a sharp display of unyielding authority. Preparing to dismantle his entire argument, she readies a single devastating revelation. Arialaina fiercely strikes back, challenging the prince to question why his sycophants instantly blamed her for the attacks. Shockwaves violently ripple through the room as she coldly confesses to orchestrating the delivery of the bird and cat corpses. She openly embraces the horror, acknowledging the wicked blade sent to shatter her rival's peace. A chilling, dominant smirk threatens to break her composure as she leans directly into the horrifying truth. Masterfully flipping the narrative, she reveals she merely returned the exact threats her enemies originally sent her, matching dagger with shoelace and corpses with claws. Dark satisfaction laces her venomous tone as she notes the resulting terror drove one of her attackers into a sudden illness. Executing a flawless counterattack, she utilized manor servants to deliver the chilling warnings directly to her tormentors' bedroom doors. Appalled by their hypocrisy, Arialaina eviscerates the shameless entourage for attempting to frame her for the very torment they inflicted upon her. Her piercing gaze locks onto the true mastermind, publicly dragging Count Norrell's daughter, Claudia Foscarl, into the brutal spotlight. Dismissing their pathetic schemes entirely, Arialaina mocks her attackers for severely lacking both unyielding resolve and basic imagination. Flustered and desperate, Eirik violently deflects by claiming only someone as cruel as Arialaina could be imagined orchestrating such vile harassment. The narrative sharply shifts to the heavy, suffocating chains of a political engagement decided during their childhood. Arialaina vividly recalls her father, Marquess, impressing upon her the absolute mandate to fiercely support the prince's every flaw. Driven by duty, she spent 2 grueling years mastering statecraft and infiltrating the royal court to guide the incompetent crown prince Eirik. Through endless dedication, she genuinely believed that delivering harsh admonitions and structural advice was her sacred royal obligation. Recognizing the inherent flaws of royalty, she embraced her future as a queen by serving as a vital pillar of support alongside the kingdom's generals and ministers. Exhausted by his stubborn ignorance, Arialaina abandoned her efforts entirely, reducing their recent interactions to hollow, perfunctory formalities. Her utter, freezing apathy delivered a crushing and unforgivable blow to Prince Eirik's fragile pride. When Eirik pompously demands a final defense, Arialaina coldly shoots him down, knowing his royal ears remain permanently deaf to basic reason. Accepting her icy silence as ultimate submission, the prince stands tall to deliver his final, unyielding judgment. The heavy royal atmosphere shatters completely as Eirik aggressively prepares to pronounce the final verdict. Eirik dramatically severs their political ties forever, publicly dissolving his engagement to Arialaina Hazen, daughter of Marquis Marquess. A massive shockwave of gasps erupts through the royal hall as the irreversible decree loudly echoes off the stone walls. Bowing with flawless, mocking grace, Arialaina humbly accepts the broken engagement and promises to immediately convey the news to her father. Enraged by her absolute lack of despair, Eirik screams Arialaina's name one last time, utterly furious that she refuses to offer even a sliver of apology or remorse. Prince Eirik furiously declares Arialaina completely unfit to remain a noble of the kingdom. He ruthlessly demands absolute silence from the shocked onlookers in the royal hall. A stammering official desperately tries to intervene against the harsh and sudden proclamation. Eirik screams Arialaina's name with unbridled rage echoing fiercely through the grand room. He officially and maliciously sentences her to immediate exile from the entire kingdom. Observers watch in stunned disbelief, never imagining the tense situation would escalate to such a drastic extreme. Arialaina calmly orders her furious attendant, Exile, to forcefully restrain his rising anger. Exile fiercely protests her command, gripping his weapon as he steps forward to defend his beloved lady. Accepting the unjust decree without flinching, Arialaina respectfully requests one final act of mercy from the crown. She humbly asks for a brief reprieve of 3 to 5 days before her banishment takes full effect. Eirik arrogantly grants her permission to state her final, pathetic plea before the court. He scoffs haughtily, crossing his arms as he awaits her inevitable and desperate groveling. Arialaina logically explains that she desperately needs time to properly dismiss her loyal manor servants. She projects her voice with commanding authority, ensuring every single noble present witnesses the prince's decree. Dismissing the royal court entirely, she decisively orders Exile to follow her out of the room. Eirik furiously finalizes the timeline, mandating her absolute exile at dusk in exactly 3 days. Maintaining her flawless dignity, Arialaina commands her faithful knight to escort her away from the hostile throne. They confidently turn their backs on the raging prince, walking away with unbreakable and chilling composure. Exile swiftly complies with the order, shadowing his lady's steps with unwavering and fierce loyalty. The heavy palace doors slam shut behind them, seemingly sealing her tragic and unjust fate forever. They silently traverse the sprawling, empty corridors of the grand royal estate without a single glance backward. A heavy, suffocating silence hangs in the air as they finally board their waiting carriage. Inside the carriage, Arialaina rationalizes that defying the crown prince's direct command was practically impossible. Frustrated by her chilling compliance, Exile demands to know why she accepted such a horrific fate without a fight. Arialaina completely ignores his deep concern, casually noting how perfectly the prince and his new lover suit each other. Exile sighs in exasperation, pointing out her blatant attempt to deflect the grim reality of her broken engagement. She coldly admits that reasoning with the arrogant and stubborn prince was a completely futile endeavor. Arialaina accepts the inevitable truth, acknowledging that their ruinous fallout was destined to happen eventually. She dismisses the shattered betrothal as a fundamentally ill-matched and deeply flawed political arrangement from the start. Exile gazes out the carriage window, silently absorbing the heavy weight of his lady's quiet resignation. He mutters a sarcastic remark, reminding her that his own position within her household is now equally precarious. Arialaina offers a small, knowing smile, appreciating her loyal attendant's sharp wit amidst the surrounding chaos. She playfully chides his disrespectful tone, noting that true disrespect stems from a fundamental lack of proper reverence. Exile fiercely clarifies his protective stance, boldly declaring the foolish prince completely unworthy of her brilliance. Shifting gears completely, Arialaina asks if he noticed a crucial, hidden detail during the explosive confrontation. She chuckles softly at Exale's fierce loyalty, brushing off his incredibly disrespectful critique of the crown. She sharply recalls the precise moment a terrified chamberlain desperately attempted to halt Eirik's catastrophic decree. Analyzing the chaotic situation, Arialaina deduces that the exile was an impulsive, unapproved whim hidden from the senior ministers. She ruthlessly notes that the prince's impulsive words are now binding, as a royal decree is as irreversible as spilled water. Exile clenches his fists in blistering rage, appalled that a marquis's daughter was discarded on a mere foolish whim. Analyzing the dire situation, Arialaina coldly realizes that Prince Eirik made absolutely no logistical preparations to execute an official exile. She points out to Exile that the true danger lies in whether the decree was a fleeting whim or simply kept hidden from his inner circle. Gripping her absolute resolve, she boldly declares that her uncompromising path forward is firmly decided. Exile quickly acknowledges her unshakable determination but immediately questions their next vital move. Furious at the prince's arrogance, she realizes he fully expected her to cower and beg, deeply insulting her father and the prestigious House Marquess. She pauses in the quiet corridor, letting the heavy weight of the royal insult fuel her rising and dangerous determination. Recalling her grandfather's vital teachings, she asks Exile what a martial house like theirs must fiercely avoid at all costs. Curious about the former lord's ancient wisdom, Exile asks what vital lesson her grandfather imparted. She firmly states her grandfather's golden rule, declaring that a martial house must never allow itself to be looked down upon by anyone. She proudly explains that their true role is to fiercely enforce peace through overwhelming martial might without shedding unnecessary blood. Cutting the philosophy short, Arialaina sharply states that the time for peaceful compliance is completely over. Sensing her rising battle aura, Exile excitedly asks if she plans to wage open and bloody war against the crown. Exile presses further, demanding to know what brilliant strategy she will employ if not direct combat. Arialaina logically dismisses a direct assault, noting that burning the capital would lead to an unwinnable and disastrous battle. Kneeling with unwavering loyalty, Exile swears to fiercely support her chosen path with all his overwhelming strength. A dangerous smirk crosses her face as she vows to make Prince Eirik deeply regret giving her 3 days to prepare. Her cold, calculated gaze sharpens intensely as she solidifies the devastating blueprint for her impending counterattack. Breaking the tense silence, she briskly announces that their schedule is about to become incredibly demanding. She gathers her loyal household, standing before them with absolute, unshakable authority radiating from her posture. Addressing her servants directly, she formally announces her impending exile scheduled for dusk in exactly 3 days. She loudly clarifies that this devastating decree comes directly by the absolute and irrevocable order of His Highness, Prince Eirik. Expressing deep gratitude for their unwavering service, she grimly informs them that the Grand Mansion must be completely vacated. She explains that exile in their kingdom strips a person entirely of the king's crucial legal protection and casts them into the dangerous wilds. Raising the stakes, she warns that the kingdom's harsh laws severely punish anyone caught knowingly aiding a banished exile. Despite her grim sentence, she promises that those who continue serving her will safely relocate with their families to the Marquessate. A heavy, anxious silence grips the crowded room as the servants absorb the dangerous reality of her proposition. Sweetening the dangerous deal, she swears to provide even better treatment and wages for those brave enough to follow her home. Showing immense grace, she refuses to blame anyone who chooses to abandon her, fully acknowledging the terrifying weight of the prince's absolute law. For those desiring to stay, she promises to use her remaining influence to speak favorably on their behalf to the mansion's incoming master. Laying out their crucial options, she asks them to carefully consider whether they will journey to the Marquessate or remain in the capital. Demanding swift resolution, she strictly orders every servant to finalize their life-altering decision by noon the following day. To ensure their survival, she guarantees letters of recommendation and a full month's advance wages for those seeking new employment in the royal capital. Bowing her head slightly, she earnestly prays for the safety and ultimate good fortune of every servant, regardless of their chosen path. The loyal servants watch her in stunned silence, deeply moved by their master's unyielding compassion in the face of total ruin. Shifting her focus to immediate action, she calls her core tactical team together to outline their critical next steps. Exuding tactical brilliance, Arialaina declares that they must begin their desperate planning by securing the absolute basics. Spreading a detailed map, she points out their current position in the hostile royal capital and sets their ultimate destination as the Marquessate. Analyzing the dire military reality, she admits that the crushing difference in troop numbers makes conventional combat completely impossible. She brutally states that charging head-on into the royal forces would guarantee their absolute and immediate slaughter. Flashing a cunning smile, she reveals that their overwhelming enemies possess a critical, exploitable weakness regarding time. Pointing to a detailed map, Arialaina explains that the long road down to Marquess crosses the treacherous Dragonwing mountain range. She notes that the deep winter snows on the mountain's northwest side make moving an invading royal army utterly impossible. Securing the Alas Pass before the first snowfall will successfully block the royal family from launching any immediate military interference. Her finger traces a strategic line across the intricate map as she highlights the crucial geographic choke points. Pausing purposefully, she indicates a specific target required to perfectly execute their defensive mountain strategy. Arialaina smoothly confirms Stuart's silent realization as her clerks begin to grasp the sheer scale of her bold plan. Stuart correctly identifies the vital port city of Redan as the ultimate key to locking down the mountain pass. Securing both the Alas Pass and the bustling port of Redan stands as the absolute condition for their survival. Acknowledging the strategic brilliance of the plan, she sternly warns against taking too much precious time to execute it. An anxious clerk questions if they must violently conquer the vital port city using brute military force. Refusing to cede internal resentment within her father's territory, Arialaina completely rejects the idea of a bloody siege. She commands her team to brilliantly secure Redan through cunning schemes and aggressive negotiations to minimize devastating casualties. One of her strategists realizes that her true method relies on masterful political subversion rather than brute strength. The heavy weight of her treasonous but necessary tactics settles over the intensely focused war council. Calculating their strict deadline, she reminds everyone they have barely a month and a half before the December snows hit. She flawlessly outlines the royal army's march, estimating it takes slightly over 10 days to reach the Alas Pass. Refusing to waste a single second, she orders her forces to simultaneously execute political subversion and rapid war preparations. Avail fiercely questions how she possibly intends to stall the massive royal army long enough to complete such a complex plan. Arialaina gazes down at the sprawling map with a dangerously cunning smile forming on her lips. Tracing the enemy's inevitable march, she sharply illustrates the exact path the royal forces must take to attack her home. Confident in her absolute intellectual superiority, she ominously declares that there are brilliant ways to artificially delay their foes. She lists the massive logistical nightmare of summoning troops, checking supplies, and securing merchant contracts required for a royal march. Her attentive clerks eagerly nod in absolute agreement as they recognize the fragile bureaucratic foundation of military power. Confirming her tactical brilliance, she asks Exile to verify that an army physically cannot march without perfect logistical execution. With chilling precision, Arialaina reveals that severing just one vital link in their supply chain will instantly paralyze the royal army. Gesturing to the scribes, she proudly announces that they are the absolute key to completely destroying the crown's military logistics. The stunned clerks hesitate, grasping the terrifying realization that their administrative skills are now devastating weapons of war. Empowering her loyal administrators, she violently commands them to sever the royal supply chain using nothing but pens and ink. Having secured their primary sabotage strategy, Arialaina briskly shifts focus to the massive mountain of remaining escape preparations. The loyal household furiously scrambles into action, fueled by their master's overwhelming confidence and tactical genius. She rapidly delegates the massive task of aggressively liquidating the estate's affairs and securing the safety of the remaining servants. Addressing the overwhelming pressure, she reminds her exhausted but fiercely loyal staff of the grand promise she made them. She boldly reiterates her ironclad guarantee to fiercely compensate every ounce of their impending hardship with unprecedented wealth. A roaring, unified cheer erupts from the determined staff as they fully embrace the dangerous chaos ahead. Flashing a dazzling, dangerous smile, she formally ignites their final desperate sprint for survival against the crown. Instantly switching into absolute command mode, she aggressively rallies the entire war room to their specific operational stations. She barks rapid-fire orders to draft urgent letters to the Knights' Hall and desperately secure their innocent financial partners. The room explodes into a blur of frantic writing and shouting as the clerks brilliantly weaponize their massive administrative ledgers. She ruthlessly commands her staff to fake sudden illnesses to cancel public schedules while secretly arranging a rapid naval escape. Shocking her most loyal follower, Arialaina abruptly orders Exile to bravely remain behind in the hostile royal capital. Pulling Stuart aside amidst the frantic preparations, Arialaina solemnly asks her trusted retainer for a private moment. Deeply offended by the sudden implication of being left behind, Stuart fiercely reminds her that he once proudly fought in the former lord's personal forces. Smiling gently at his fierce and protective dedication, she quickly assures the veteran that she never once doubted his unwavering loyalty. Stunned by her sudden shift in tone, Stuart completely freezes in absolute and silent surprise. Softening her sharp demeanor, she honestly admits that she absolutely refuses to earn the bitter resentment of his lovely grandchild. She piercingly questions how he could possibly justify abandoning his beloved grandchild right before their impending wedding. Placing her ultimate trust in his capable hands, she declares that only he can grant her the total peace of mind required to leave the capital mansion behind. She logically points out that the terrified servants remaining in the capital desperately need a strong leader to organize their chaotic survival. The heavy weight of her immense compassion profoundly strikes the battle-hardened veteran into total, awestruck silence. Bowing with absolute reverence and deep emotion, Stuart humbly accepts his final, critical mission from his beloved lady. The narrative abruptly shifts, plunging the high-octane story into the tense, shadowed halls of a distant military compound. A quiet, dangerous intensity fills the grim facility as seasoned warriors await their next violent command. A tense knight furiously studies an urgent, life-altering dispatch delivered directly from the royal capital. Grasping the terrifying weight of the radical orders, a subordinate grimly notes they must simply execute exactly what is written on the page. Seeking critical leadership in the mounting chaos, the anxious soldier desperately asks Lord Kurtzfried what their next decisive move will be. Staring deeply into the flickering shadows, Kurtzfried silently absorbs the massive, treasonous implications of the sudden letter. A profound mix of absolute awe and thrilling dread washes over him as he softly whispers his formidable sister's name. He heavily reflects on the terrifying and brilliant intersection where unyielding strength perfectly meets deceptive softness. The narrative solemnly recounts how Lady Arialaina Hazen flawlessly dedicated her entire existence to serving as the Crown Prince's loyal fiancée. Despite lacking romantic love, she fiercely believed they could forge a legendary political partnership for the absolute glory of the Kingdom of Sansar. However, shattered by false accusations and a brutal annulment, she was mercilessly and unjustly banished from her own country. A dark, rebellious undertone violently shatters the tragic recap, boldly declaring that her pathetic end was merely a fleeting illusion. A terrified knight reports the impossible orders demanding all personnel immediately vacate the Knights' Hall and rally with Arialaina by tomorrow noon. Kurtzfried repeats his sister's name, completely overwhelmed by the sheer, terrifying audacity of her sweeping command. His sharp eyes furiously scan the official letter, decoding the massive strategic rebellion brilliantly hidden within the ink. A shocking realization violently hits him as he correctly deduces her insane but calculated plan to completely abandon the royal capital. He aggressively reasons that she could easily flee back to Mares or pathetically beg the crown if she merely wanted her banishment revoked. Realizing she is actively stealing the knights, he uncovers her terrifying intention to launch a massive, unprecedented counterattack from the Marquessate. When desperately pressed for exact tactical specifics, he bluntly admits he has absolutely no idea what glorious madness she will unleash. A dangerous, bloodthirsty smirk slowly rips across Kurtzfried's face as the raw thrill of absolute treason fully takes hold. He violently shatters the tense silence, declaring that their grim situation leaves them with only two extreme and absolute choices. Glaring at his bewildered men, he fiercely reminds them of his sister's legendary, unforgiving, and explosive temperament. He boldly commands that they must either immediately crush her rebellion with force or march exactly as she dictates. The anxious subordinate sweats profusely, readily acknowledging the terrifying difficulty of ever opposing the fearsome Arialaina in combat. Kurtzfried confidently dismisses their rising fears, swearing his brilliant sister would never ignite a massive war without a flawless master plan. Cementing his unwavering loyalty, he reveals she already issued a direct summons demanding his absolute presence by tomorrow morning. Flashing a knowing grin, the relieved subordinate proudly notes that their highly dangerous choice has already been made. Exploding with sudden, raw military energy, Kurtzfried powerfully rises to fully meet his sister's glorious call to arms. He roars a deafening command across the armory, ordering every single knight to immediately move out and march on the capital estate by noon tomorrow. Fueled by absolute loyalty, the heavily armored warriors aggressively mobilize to follow the Hazen bloodline into glorious, uncharted chaos. Kurtzfried barks fierce orders to his commander to immediately begin the rapid military arrangements. He reflects grimly that his unyielding sister and the arrogant prince were absolutely never destined to get along. Highlighting their explosive clash, he notes that Arialaina boldly speaks her mind while the spoiled prince demands total and blind compliance. Acknowledging the shattered engagement, he wishes the fiercely loyal Arvale had been present to halt the absolute disaster. He wonders aloud how many men in the entire country actually possess the immense capacity to truly accept his formidable sister. A heavy, thoughtful silence dominates the tense armory as the terrifying weight of Arialaina's brilliance fully sinks in. A cunning smirk violently crosses his face as he realizes Arialaina and Arvale form an absolutely perfect, unstoppable pair. The narrative sharply shifts back to the chaotic and suffocating war room at the Grand Capital Estate. Piles of critical documents and treasonous logistical ledgers rapidly flood the heavy wooden desks. The fiercely loyal clerks frantically process the massive mountain of dangerous paperwork without a single moment of rest. Arialaina sharply commands Arvale to immediately handle another towering stack of urgent administrative documents. Arvale swiftly steps forward to execute his lady's precise and overwhelmingly demanding orders without a shred of hesitation. Accepting the heavy burden, the fiercely loyal knight immediately confirms the critical and tedious administrative task. The intense, overwhelming administrative battle aggressively continues as every loyal servant pushes themselves to their absolute limits. The frantic sounds of urgent footsteps echo sharply through the chaotic, paper-filled command center. The relentless, grueling pace of their desperate escape preparations pushes everyone to the very terrifying brink of total exhaustion. Arialaina warmly thanks Stuart as the veteran retainer faithfully hands her yet another massive stack of vital strategic reports. Gazing at her exhausted and dedicated staff, she silently resolves that she absolutely must allow her loyal followers to rest soon. A brief, heavy moment of immense physical fatigue suddenly washes over the brilliant but severely overworked mastermind. Receiving her final decisive instructions, a loyal clerk firmly and loudly acknowledges the absolute command. Arialaina loudly applauds their flawless work and officially halts the frantic, treasonous preparations for the exhausting day. The massively relieved staff simultaneously slumps in absolute exhaustion as the brutal and grueling shift finally ends. Dropping her unyielding iron mask, Arialaina softly confesses her own overwhelming physical and mental exhaustion to her knight. She stretches her aching muscles, feeling the immense, crushing weight of her incredibly dangerous master plan. Deeply concerned for her deteriorating health, Arvale gently urges his beloved lady to finally seek proper rest. Acknowledging his unwavering dedication, she softly replies that he desperately needs critical rest as well. Her tone abruptly sharpens as she violently admits she cannot actually allow her absolute greatest asset to sleep just yet. Arvale immediately points out her dangerous lack of a proper break since the explosive royal confrontation earlier that evening. Startled by her sudden shift in deadly demeanor, he questions if she truly needs him for another task right now. He asks in total disbelief if she seriously intends to send him out on a highly dangerous midnight errand. Fiercely protective, Arvale sharply reminds her that his absolute primary duty is to act as her ultimate physical bodyguard. Brushing off his frantic concern, Arialaina aggressively commands him to immediately deliver a highly classified letter to Ezrin. She forcefully silences his fierce protests by declaring he is the only living soul she can absolutely trust with this explosive mission. The absolute weight of her unshakable trust violently strikes Arvale, instantly dissolving his stubborn, protective resistance. She brilliantly reassures him by revealing that Kurtzfried and 2 elite knights will arrive at dawn to fully secure her life. Arvale heavily processes her flawless tactical contingency plan, realizing she has already brilliantly calculated every single dangerous variable. Yielding to her flawless logic, he admits he can temporarily leave her side since the formidable young lord is arriving to protect her. Accepting the dangerous, high-stakes midnight mission, Arvale firmly agrees with her absolute and unshakable strategic necessity. Thanking her loyal sword, Arialaina aggressively dives into fully explaining the highly classified and explosive details of his covert mission. She flawlessly outlines their grand deception, commanding the knights to follow later and create the absolute perfect illusion of a pathetic retreat to Maris. Arialaina dismisses Arvale to prepare for his mission while she firmly resolves to handle the packing herself. She commands Arvale to go and get himself completely ready for the arduous and dangerous path ahead. Bowing deeply, Arvale accepts her command with unyielding loyalty and immediate, unquestioning obedience. Knowing the massive scale of their treasonous plan, she boldly reflects on the incredibly long journey awaiting them. She meticulously packs the crucial travel rations alongside towering stacks of highly classified strategic documents. A sharp, sudden rustle cuts through the tense air as she aggressively searches through her remaining belongings. A quiet moment of profound reflection overtakes her as she pauses to carefully consider her next vital move. The heavy, suffocating silence in the room amplifies the overwhelming gravity of her impending and unjust exile. She stares down at an object in her hands, her expression hardening with fierce, unforgiving determination. The hidden object gleams coldly in the dim light, serving as a stark reminder of the massive betrayal she just endured. Filled with intense regret, Arialaina bitterly mutters that she should have violently thrown the trinket back at the prince's arrogant face. She forcefully drops the discarded item onto the wooden table with a sharp, echoing clatter. The abandoned artifact rests silently, completely stripped of its former royal prestige and emotional meaning. Her sharp gaze shifts rapidly as she remembers another crucial item she must completely and utterly discard. Reaching into her belongings, she aggressively pulls out a ceremonial weapon intrinsically tied to her shattered past. The beautifully crafted blade brilliantly reflects her cold, unyielding resolve to completely sever her ties to the kingdom. She ruthlessly discards the royal-crested dagger, boldly declaring she no longer has any use for such a pathetic trinket. The discarded dagger aggressively hits the table, fully symbolizing the absolute death of her tragic royal engagement. She snaps her heavy travel bag shut with a crisp, echoing crack that definitively seals her dangerous new fate. A sudden, sharp sting violently bites her hand as she aggressively wrestles with the stiff leather straps. A tiny bead of crimson blood instantly forms on her delicate finger from the sudden, sharp graze. She coldly stares at the minor wound, utterly unfazed by the sudden and entirely unexpected flash of physical pain. The faint, metallic scent of blood barely registers as she ruthlessly suppresses any visible sign of weakness. A heavy knock suddenly echoes through the tense room as her fiercely loyal knight returns to her side. The thick wooden door slowly creaks open, entirely shattering the heavy, suffocating silence of her private quarters. Announcing his swift return, Arvale steps into the room while Arialaina brightly remarks how much lighter she feels. Stepping fully into the warm light, the battle-ready knight firmly confirms he has successfully completed all his preparations. Arialaina commands him to wait a brief moment as she aggressively finishes securing her heavy, vital travel bag. Detecting a subtle, dangerous shift in her demeanor, Arvale anxiously questions his beloved lady with fierce, protective concern. His sharp, highly trained eyes instantly lock onto the tiny bead of blood staining her otherwise flawless hand. Brushing off his intense worry, she coldly lies that her hand simply slipped and the minor wound is absolutely nothing. Arvale stares at her with deep, unwavering intensity, silently recognizing the heavy emotional toll she desperately attempts to hide. Handing him his necessary supplies, she humbly states that this small gesture is the absolute least she can do for him. She instructs him to consume the packed rations when short on time, earning his deep, highly respectful gratitude. A brief, heavy pause permanently hangs between them as the terrifying reality of their separate, dangerous missions finally sets in. Arialaina softly apologizes for forcefully burdening him with the most dangerous and incredibly difficult role of their entire operation. Smiling with absolute devotion, Arvale boldly declares that her immense trust in him during this crisis brings him genuine happiness. He gazes at her with absolute, unwavering loyalty, fully prepared to execute his highly dangerous and explosive midnight mission. Deeply moved by his fierce dedication, Arialaina warmly thanks Arvale for his unbreakable and completely absolute support. Fully embracing their perilous master plan, she confidently entrusts the absolute success of the deadly mission directly to his capable hands. Arvale formally confirms he has securely received the highly classified letter from his lady. He bows deeply and swears to execute the dangerous delivery without a single trace of failure. Arialaina gazes at her most loyal knight and firmly commands him to stay completely safe. Placing her entire fate in his hands, she earnestly admits she is counting on his absolute success. Fully prepared for the perilous midnight mission, Arvale boldly declares his immediate departure. Before vanishing into the shadows, the fierce bodyguard urges his beloved lady to fiercely guard her own life. Arialaina silently nods, her unwavering resolve shining brightly as she accepts his final parting words. The narrative sharply shifts from the tense rebel stronghold to the suffocatingly opulent halls of the royal palace. Prince Eirik strides into a dimly lit royal bedchamber and aggressively demands an update on the patient's condition. The frail and motionless body of the reigning king lies trapped in a terrifyingly deep, unending slumber. After the nervous attendant confirms the king's unchanging coma, Eirik coldly dismisses the servant from the silent room. The heavy wooden door clicks shut, leaving the arrogant crown prince completely alone with his incapacitated monarch. Staring down at the pathetic figure, Eirik softly mutters his father's name with a chilling lack of genuine sorrow. His thoughts violently pivot to Arialaina Hazen, cursing his former fiancée for constantly overstepping her prescribed royal boundaries. Glaring at his helpless father, Eirik arrogantly vows to aggressively rebuild the fractured royal court from the ground up. A twisted smile breaks across his face as he fiercely rejoices that the insufferable nuisance is finally banished forever. The immense and foreboding royal palace looms silently under the dark night sky, hiding its deeply rotten political core. Eirik confidently marches through the grand, echoing palace corridors with renewed and dangerous absolute authority. A shadowy, calculating figure abruptly emerges from the darkness to intercept the proud crown prince. The Minister of Internal Affairs bows with perfectly practiced but entirely hollow respect before his arrogant future ruler. The cunning politician masks his true ambitions behind a flawless veneer of absolute, unyielding loyalty. Probing for vital political leverage, the minister smoothly inquires about His Majesty's current deteriorating health. Eirik stops in his tracks, his eyes narrowing as he aggressively meets the seasoned politician's dangerous gaze. The prince bluntly states there has been absolutely no change in his father's pathetic, lingering comatose state. Shifting tactics, the minister notes the explosive rumors regarding the severed engagement, which Eirik fiercely and proudly confirms. As the minister murmurs his calculated agreement, Eirik impatiently demands to know what the scheming official truly wants. The sly minister brilliantly praises the brutal annulment as a profoundly wise decision without directly insulting the dying king's original decree. Eirik viciously complains that while Arialaina possessed a sharp wit, she completely failed to understand the absolute submissive duty of a queen. He proudly announces his brilliant new political maneuver to install Lord Norrell's daughter, Claudia, as his fully compliant future bride. The manipulative minister instantly applauds the short-sighted prince, declaring the new, easily controlled match an absolutely excellent choice. Eirik puffs his chest with immense, sickening pride, completely oblivious to the dangerous political snare tightening around him. The minister smoothly suggests officially approaching Lord Norrell immediately to prevent the vicious court rumors from deeply insulting the powerful noble. Eirik eagerly agrees, allowing the cunning minister to officially dispatch an urgent royal messenger in the crown prince's name. The prince sharply watches the minister's retreating back, his royal arrogance momentarily pierced by a fleeting spark of genuine suspicion. Eirik bitterly admits to himself that the treacherous Minister of Internal Affairs remains an incredibly difficult and dangerous man to fully read. He correctly deduces that the surrounding vultures are desperately trying to calculate the exact, bloody moment the frail king will finally perish. Eirik angrily realizes that their pathetic inquiries stem entirely from greedy ambition rather than genuine concern for the kingdom or his dying father. He disgustedly imagines the high officials desperately hoarding court gossip and minor servant slips to violently exploit the looming succession crisis. He knows the treacherous court is frantically calculating how to rapidly multiply their political allies and ruthlessly butcher their vulnerable enemies. Gripped by overwhelming hypocrisy, Eirik fiercely condemns the entire royal court as utterly repulsive, wildly arrogant, and deeply disrespectful. Determined to seize absolute control, the future king vows never to let the ulterior motives of high officials sway his reign. Realizing the immense burden ahead, he forcefully accepts that he must forge a powerful royal house entirely with his own hands. His ruthless resolve hardens as he reflects on his father collapsing before passing down the essential knowledge of rulership. Analyzing his precarious situation, the young royal aggressively questions who among his court will refrain from offering unwanted interference. Searching for absolute loyalty, he mentally interrogates his inner circle to find an ally who truly lacks excessive, dangerous ambitions. Desperate for a solid foundation, he frantically searches his mind for a single, dependable confidant whom he can implicitly trust. A heavy, oppressive silence blankets the regal atmosphere as he sternly contemplates the treacherous path towards securing his supreme authority. Dismissing his former prospect, he coldly determines that Arialaina completely failed to understand her proper, subservient position as a queen. A tense, brooding silence briefly descends as his pragmatic mind meticulously calculates the exact requirements for his ultimate royal consort. Defining his ideal match, he definitively concludes that his chosen queen must simply understand him without ever overstepping her political bounds. Rejecting royal insubordination, he fiercely views any girl who constantly interferes at every single opportunity as nothing more than a detestable nuisance. Fully aware of the lurking vultures, he braces for the high officials tracking his new fiancée and monitoring his ailing father's worsening condition. With unshakable, terrifying resolve, he coldly declares that his ruthless path forward is already definitively and permanently decided. Pausing amidst his grand design, the young prince calculatingly wonders what his very next strategic move should be to secure the throne. Driven by an undeniable duty, he aggressively vows to completely rebuild the corrupted court from the ground up for the sake of the kingdom. A profound narrative shift introduces the paramount, unyielding duty of what it truly means for a consort to love the king. Lady Claudia steps into the unfolding drama, carrying the fragile, overwhelming weight of her newly appointed position within the royal court. A polite maid firmly instructs Lady Claudia to wait patiently in the grand hall until Prince Eirik finally arrives. Maintaining her flawless composure, Claudia gracefully acknowledges the servant's directive with a soft, deeply obedient confirmation. Surprising the gentle noblewoman, a cheerful maid abruptly presents a special, highly unexpected gift delivered directly from His Highness. Astonished by the grand gesture, Claudia beholds the incredibly rare spring-picked tea imported all the way from the distant southern lands. Fulfilling her swift duty, the respectful maid bows deeply and quietly takes her leave from Lady Claudia's elegant, isolated presence. Still processing the sudden royal attention, Claudia gently affirms the departure while gazing intently at her luxurious, unexpected gift. Overwhelmed by deep emotion, she softly whispers her absolute disbelief that His Highness personally selected such a thoughtful present just for her. Grounding herself in her shocking new reality, Claudia silently reaffirms her prestigious, incredibly heavy status as the ruling prince's chosen fiancée. Looking back on her sudden elevation, she vividly remembers that her fateful encounter with His Highness originally happened purely by mere chance. 6 months prior, destiny forcefully intervened during a grand ball when the favored Arialaina suddenly and mysteriously failed to attend the event. Recalling the heavy burden marring the prince's face, Claudia realizes with absolute certainty that he bears the kingdom's immense weight completely alone. This solemn realization strikes exactly 2 agonizing years after His Highness's father, the reigning king, originally succumbed to his debilitating illness. Stepping boldly into the vivid memory, Claudia courageously addresses His Highness with a trembling voice entirely full of deep reverence. Radiating pure empathy, she gently implores the exhausted prince to prioritize his own failing health and emotional well-being. Apologizing for her forwardness, she tenderly acknowledges the crushing, weighty responsibilities he flawlessly executes day after grueling day. A quiet, deeply impactful moment stretches between them as the immense weight of her genuine compassion forcefully hangs in the silent air. Holding the cherished memory close to her beating heart, Claudia affectionately reflects on the exact, life-altering day they truly connected. She fondly remembers the undeniably faint, almost imperceptible expression of profound shock that briefly crossed his hardened, royal features. Touching his deeply buried sorrow, she successfully pierces his royal armor and evokes a genuine, surprised emotional response from the isolated prince. Understanding his tragic isolation, Claudia sorrowfully concludes that a king's life remains inherently lonely without someone to simply care for him. Observing the prince from afar, Claudia keenly deduces that Arialaina cannot truly be close to his isolated heart. She privately muses that compatibility matters immensely, wondering if she could support the human prince as a concubine. Interrupting her thoughts, a nervous noblewoman cautiously approaches Claudia to speak privately about a deeply troubling matter. The anxious girl confesses that foolish young ladies ruthlessly harassed Arialaina by sending dead animals and blades. Appalled by the sheer childishness, Claudia struggles to comprehend the senseless malice as the girl notes a friend's absence. Trembling with fear, the desperate lady frantically presents a mysterious, horrifying retaliatory package that suddenly arrived. Shocked by the gruesome contents, they discover terrifying animal claws intentionally hidden within the ominous delivery. The horrified friend tearfully admits to also receiving intimidating bird feathers and cat claws from their unseen enemy. A suffocating, dreadful silence envelopes the room as the sheer psychological terror of the retaliation fully sinks in. Realizing the danger, they acknowledge that the powerful Marquis daughter Arialaina would relentlessly investigate the original culprits. Pure horror strikes Claudia upon learning the sinister threat was slipped silently beneath a victim's defenseless bedroom door. The trembling girl desperately hopes the busy prince remains entirely oblivious to this rapidly escalating vicious feud. Pointing nervously at a mysterious envelope, the anxious friend stammers a weak defense of their previous actions. Furious, Claudia condemns the ruthless tactic of striking someone in their most private, completely defenseless sanctuary. Burning with fiery indignation, she viciously curses the cold-blooded Marquis daughter for executing such a terrifying psychological counterattack. She quickly realizes the gruesome packages are not mere pranks but blatant, undeniable threats of sudden murder. Enraged by this absolute cruelty, Claudia fiercely vows that such a monstrous woman must never become the ruling queen. Resolving to protect him, she passionately imagines creating a peaceful sanctuary to ease the prince's crushing daily burdens. Abruptly seizing control of the panic, Claudia demands a solemn, unbreakable promise from her trembling companion. While agreeing to handle the dangerous crisis, she secretly plots to permanently separate Arialaina from His Highness immediately. Exuding absolute authority, she coldly commands the terrified girl to never breathe a single word of this incident. A heavy, oppressive stillness solidifies the immense weight of Claudia's strict, unyielding gag order upon the fragile girl. She further demands absolute, total secrecy regarding both the foolish harassment and their deeply confidential consultation today. Offering a thin lifeline, she firmly promises to deploy protective measures only if the terrified girl swears total silence. Imposing a terrifying ultimatum, she commands the weeping girl to carry this dangerous secret silently to her very grave. Broken by deep fear, the thoroughly intimidated friend stammers a hasty, desperately obedient agreement to the harsh terms. Shifting to the royal chambers, the furious prince aggressively questions the validity of a shocking new report. Standing firmly before the throne, Claudia confidently and decisively confirms the terrifying allegations against his current fiancée. Visibly shaken by the dark betrayal, the devastated prince softly whispers Claudia's name into the tense, heavy air. A dramatic, suffocating pause hangs over the grand room as he painstakingly processes the reality of the vicious threats. Stepping forward resolutely, Claudia forcefully presents the undeniable, gruesome physical proof of Arialaina's unhinged intimidation campaign. Staring darkly at the terrifying evidence, the prince feels his royal composure slowly fracturing under the massive weight. Driving the metaphorical knife deeper, Claudia forcefully argues that the twisted packages are literal, unapologetic death threats. Pleading passionately, she desperately warns the prince of the utter catastrophe that would follow if Arialaina became queen. Taking commanding control of the volatile situation, the prince demands Claudia's absolute silence regarding his upcoming royal decree. Validating her deepest fears, he coldly admits he already considered the dangerous Arialaina entirely unfit for the throne. With chilling royal finality, the prince decisively decrees that his ruthless former fiancée must be permanently removed. A sweeping, dramatic silence completely fills the grand chamber as the immense gravity of his deadly order settles. Bowing gracefully in the quiet room, Claudia hides a victorious smile as her bold, calculated manipulation flawlessly succeeds. Submitting perfectly to his absolute royal will, Claudia formally and obediently accepts his chilling execution command. The prince solemnly asks Claudia if she will faithfully support him by his side from now on. Overwhelmed with emotion, Claudia gazes up at him and reverently breathes his royal title. Blushing deeply, she joyfully accepts his grand proposal and declares she is absolutely delighted. She leans into his embrace with a hidden, darkly triumphant smirk gracing her delicate features. The prince softly calls her name as they share an intensely intimate, tender moment. The peaceful romantic imagery fades as the heavy, oppressive atmosphere of the royal court looms. Standing in a grand room, Claudia formally and respectfully greets His Highness. He quickly dismisses her polite formalities and sincerely apologizes for keeping her waiting. Realizing the late hour, he concernedly questions if she has already eaten her meal. She shyly indicates her empty stomach, proving she waited patiently for his royal arrival. Nodding understandingly, the prince reveals he has abruptly summoned her father to the castle. Claudia softly explains she hoped they might eat together, but he immediately interrupts her. His expression darkens into a completely serious, unyielding mask of absolute royal authority. He firmly rejects the simple idea of dining with a single, resolute denial. He thoughtfully muses that they perhaps should have traveled directly to her father instead. Claudia quickly reassures the prince that her loyal father will arrive at the estate immediately. A heavy, expectant silence fiercely stretches between them as they await the impending meeting. The prince trails off cryptically, hinting at the monumental weight of his upcoming declaration. The grand, imposing exterior of the royal palace stands tall against the bright daytime sky. A luxurious, horse-drawn carriage urgently arrives at the towering castle gates at breakneck speed. The dramatic title card for the banishment of Lady Arialaina sharply interrupts the unfolding narrative. Heavily armored royal guards swiftly push open the massive wooden gates to grant immediate entry. The ornate carriage rolls smoothly into the heavily fortified, fiercely guarded royal courtyard. A formal attendant rushes forward and quickly yanks the heavy carriage door wide open. Urgent footsteps echo loudly across the stone floor as a frantic figure hurries blindly inside. Claudia's father, Earl Norrell, bursts into the grand castle with a highly anxious, terrified expression. He nervously realizes they skipped the usual security check as he rushes deeper into the fortress. Sweating profusely, he frantically wonders why on earth His Highness suddenly demanded his presence. The frightened Earl gulps heavily, desperately trying to compose himself before facing absolute royalty. The prince coldly addresses Ludovico, boldly declaring his immediate intent to take Claudia. Completely caught off guard, the stunned Earl stammers a weak, utterly confused response. The prince mercilessly drops a bombshell, fiercely demanding Claudia as his primary consort. Struggling to process the shocking news, the panicked Earl desperately asks if he meant concubine. The prince sharply clarifies that this is a formal engagement for the primary royal throne. Utterly floored by the astronomical promotion, Ludovico practically screams in sheer, unadulterated disbelief. Panicking wildly, the Earl aggressively questions what this means for the currently engaged Lady Arialaina. The prince ruthlessly declares the former engagement completely dissolved, deeming Arialaina utterly unworthy of him. A terrifying realization violently strikes the Earl as the immense political fallout crashes over him. The prince glares coldly at the older man, ominously asking if he has forgotten something crucial. Terrified of royal wrath, the trembling Earl frantically questions if His Majesty actually authorized this upheaval. Sweating profusely, Earl Norrell desperately questions if it is truly all right to decide such a major matter without confirming His Majesty's absolute will. Dismissing the concern entirely, the arrogant prince declares himself the acting regent who has no need to trouble his ailing father. Piercing the trembling nobleman with a cold stare, the regent aggressively demands to know Earl Norrell's final answer. Caught completely off guard by the intense pressure, the stunned Earl stammers wildly in pure, unadulterated panic. Ludovico frantically reminds the prince that Arialaina is the daughter of the great Marquis Mars, whose massive influence secured the original match. Trapped by favors owed to the Marquis, the terrified Earl reluctantly bows his head and weakly submits to His Highness's royal command. As the prince smoothly thanks him, the dread-filled Earl internally agonizes over how he will ever face Marquis Mars again. Pleading desperately, Ludovico warns of the catastrophic political fallout if his own daughter is publicly accused of stealing the prestigious position. Unfazed by the looming danger, the ruthless prince flatly and coldly declares that none of it matters. Trembling under the crushing royal decree, the Earl still worries deeply about what the fierce Marquis will ultimately think. Absolute shock violently shatters the Earl's composure as he loudly gasps at the sudden, terrifying mention of banishment. Staring down his trembling subject, the cold-blooded regent officially declares his shocking, irreversible decision to banish Arialaina from the entire kingdom. Dropping forcefully to his knees, the panicked Ludovico desperately begs the prince to reconsider this disastrous course of action. Tears of pure terror spring to his eyes as the Earl frantically pleads against banishing the powerful noble's cherished daughter. He fiercely argues that the Hazen Marquate serves as a vital pillar and the absolute key to defending the kingdom's eastern border. Ignoring the frantic warnings, the prince simply watches the groveling Earl with a chilling, completely unbothered smirk. A heavy, suffocating silence violently fills the grand chamber as the prince completely dismisses the desperate political reality. Shifting his attention smoothly, the prince gazes with deep, unsettling fondness at his newly chosen consort. Smiling warmly, he playfully tells Claudia that her incredibly kind personality must be inherited directly from her father. Gripped by absolute dread, the kneeling Earl mentally questions the sheer, terrifying insanity unfolding right before his eyes. He silently agonizes over how the prince can gleefully smile while casually sentencing a vital noble house's daughter to brutal exile. A profound, chilling realization of the prince's true, unhinged ruthlessness heavily settles over the terrified Earl. Breaking the unbearable tension, the prince calmly assures Earl Norrell that he fully intends to grant a pardon if Arialaina simply apologizes. With a dismissive, arrogant chuckle, he confidently assumes that the disgraced noblewoman already intends to beg for his absolute forgiveness. Desperately trying to salvage the terrifying situation, the sweating Earl hastily praises His Highness's magnanimous heart and begs forgiveness for his rudeness. The prince smoothly brushes off the frantic apology, signaling an immediate end to the intense, nerve-wracking confrontation. He casually mentions that Arialaina requested a 3-day grace period, likely just to cool her heated temper before groveling. Internally, the terrified Earl knows the proud daughter of Marquess is absolutely not someone who will ever bow her head so easily. A deep, suffocating dread continues to heavily and relentlessly crush Ludovico's violently racing heart. Trembling with pure fear, the Earl silently wonders if they are all blindly stepping into an inescapable, deadly political quagmire. The tense scene violently shifts to the bustling city streets as a luxurious carriage rumbles urgently toward a new destination. The grand carriage confidently navigates the beautiful, sunlit thoroughfares of the sprawling royal capital. Inside the swaying cabin, young Kurtz softly calls out to his older sister with a look of genuine, deep concern. Startled from her heavy thoughts, Arialaina blinks rapidly in sudden, quiet surprise at the unexpected interruption. Staring intently at her pale face, the observant boy gently points out that she looks incredibly tired from the ordeal. A brief, solemn silence heavily passes between the siblings as the immense weight of her impending banishment lingers in the air. Sighing softly, Arialaina tiredly admits she has been thinking hard about the massive amount of difficult work left to do. When Kurtz curiously asks what she is deeply thinking about, she gently deflects and claims it is nothing he needs to know. Flashing a reassuring, confident smile, she smoothly changes the subject by brightly announcing their final arrival. The majestic, towering architecture of the Grand St. Rainia Cathedral finally looms into full, breathtaking view. Pondering her shattered future, Arialaina curiously questions if she is truly suited to become a quiet nun. Her younger brother Kurtz hums thoughtfully while carefully considering her sudden, life-altering question. Shocked by the massive implication, Kurtz frantically asks if his sister genuinely intends to join the restrictive convent. Offering a gentle, ambiguous smile, Arialaina softly brushes off his rising, frantic panic. Annoyed by his loud outburst, she sharply demands restraint while vehemently denying the ridiculous assumption. Stepping gracefully into the majestic cathedral, Arialaina formally calls out to the highly respected Lady Valeria. Apologizing for the sudden visit, the noblewoman urgently requests an immediate audience to discuss a crucial matter. Recognizing her powerful guest instantly, Lady Valeria respectfully acknowledges the formidable Lady Hazen's unexpected arrival. A tense, heavy silence violently falls over the grand room as Valeria nervously awaits the visit's true purpose. Delivering the crushing blow, Arialaina coldly reveals her devastating, impending banishment from the entire kingdom. Horrified by the disastrous news, Valeria desperately insists that the powerful church can directly intercede with His Highness. Pleading passionately, the terrified holy woman frantically asks if Arialaina will finally allow them to directly intervene. Rejecting the generous offer entirely, Arialaina firmly states that His Highness has zero intention of revoking his absolute decree. Accepting her grim, unavoidable fate, she gracefully thanks Valeria while declaring that the unalterable past cannot be changed. Shifting her intense focus, Arialaina earnestly begs Her Holiness to provide absolute, unwavering protection for those remaining behind. Deeply conflicted by the cruelty, Her Holiness gently protests that this sudden, brutal exile is entirely unreasonable for Lady Hazen. Acknowledging the massive debt owed for Marquis Mares's donations, Her Holiness solemnly agrees to grant Arialaina's vital request. Staring sorrowfully at the condemned noblewoman, Valeria quietly breathes her respected name in utter, complete disbelief. Upholding strict, unyielding boundaries, Arialaina forcefully reminds them that the sacred church must never involve itself in secular affairs. Bowing respectfully, Arialaina thanks the leader as Her Holiness formally promises to take absolute charge of this dangerous matter. Highly concerned for their immediate safety, Her Holiness urgently questions what Arialaina and her younger brother intend to do next. Pivoting strategically to logistics, Arialaina calmly initiates the crucial discussion regarding the exact fate of her remaining loyalists. Outlining her rapid timeline, she confirms her firm plan to vacate the mansion by tomorrow and consult her powerful father. Confused by the rushed, frantic schedule, Valeria quickly points out that the official banishment deadline is actually the day after tomorrow. A heavy, expectant silence fiercely stretches across the room as Arialaina coldly contemplates her own preemptive, defiant departure. Flashing a proud, unyielding smirk, she boldly declares that merely waiting around simply doesn't suit her fiercely aggressive nature. Overcome with deep guilt, Her Holiness profusely apologizes for being completely unable to stop the sudden royal injustice. Showing immense, genuine gratitude, Arialaina sincerely thanks the church leaders for blindly accepting her highly unreasonable final request. Preparing to depart forever, she offers a final, deeply dignified farewell to the deeply sorrowful holy woman. Placing her absolute, unwavering trust in them, Arialaina confidently states she can now leave the capital without a single regret. Raising her hands to the heavens, Her Holiness delivers a powerful, sacred blessing for Arialaina's future safety and eternal good fortune. Leaving the cathedral's holy, quiet sanctuary, the determined noblewoman marches resolutely toward her highly uncertain destiny. The bright sunlight casts long, dramatic shadows as Arialaina and Kurtz proceed down the bustling, crowded capital streets. Breaking the tense, heavy silence of their fateful walk, Kurtz abruptly calls out to his older, stoic sister. Halting her steady, confident stride, Arialaina pauses gracefully and waits silently for her brother's looming, inevitable question. Turning to face him directly, she calmly asks what is bothering him as he demands to know if she is entirely serious. A profound, heavy quiet fiercely settles between the two siblings as they confront the massive reality of their impending exile. Glaring intensely at his sister, Kurtz desperately tries to read the true emotions hidden firmly behind her unbreakable stoic mask. Meeting his fierce, questioning gaze with absolute, unwavering resolve, Arialaina coldly confirms her deadly, undeniable serious intentions. Piercing her flawless armor, Kurtz shrewdly accuses her of simply reaching a point where her massive pride absolutely refuses to back down. An inscription of the divine name stands alone, setting a profoundly solemn tone for the unfolding narrative. A resolute voice pierces the silence, acknowledging that their dangerous assumption might indeed be the case. The visual narrative lingers silently on the heavy tension established by the sudden declaration. Fiercely gripping her resolve, the lady proudly declares she fights solely for the honor of the Hazen Marquess. The immense weight of her noble oath settles quietly over the atmosphere. Cryptic ancient characters suddenly manifest on the page, radiating a mysterious and potent energy. Glancing over her sparse belongings, she quietly accepts that these few items are all she needs to take. Prioritizing her rest, she firmly delegates the remaining cleanup duties to her loyal servant, Stuart. A sudden, heavy thud violently shatters the momentary peace of the mansion. Sharp metallic grinding pierces the air as an unseen force shifts abruptly in the darkness. An ominous sequence of numbers flashes into view, leaving a trail of unsettling mystery. Visual pacing slows deliberately, holding the reader in a beat of pure suspense. The cinematic pause stretches further, amplifying the uneasy, suffocating stillness. Surveying her immediate surroundings, she warily notes the unnatural quiet creeping into the space. The visual focus lingers on the empty area, emphasizing the eerie calm before departure. She fondly remembers Arvale's unwavering smile as he comfortingly touched her anxious hand before braving the midnight road. Staring thoughtfully into the distance, she wonders with a heavy heart how Arvale is doing now. A stark numerical readout pulses silently, marking the relentless passage of fleeting time. An attendant's voice sharply breaks her reverie to announce that the carriage stands ready for departure. A sharp, sudden gasp escapes as the absolute finality of her imminent journey strikes her. Snapping back to reality, she boldly calls out to Kurtz that she is finally coming. Gazing affectionately around her quarters, she whispers a bittersweet goodbye to the room she truly liked. A cryptic sequence of zeros underscores the lingering silence filling the cherished space one last time. Steeling her wavering emotions, she admits the profound sadness of leaving but accepts it cannot be helped. She gratefully thanks her staff as the very last pieces of her luggage are securely gathered. A chaotic flurry of fragmented text and mechanical codes wildly disrupts the solemn preparations. An urgent, desperate shout of, "My lady," explosively halts her determined path toward the carriage. Pivoting calmly toward the sudden commotion, she casually asks Kurtz if they should proceed. Someone rushes forward with desperate urgency, loudly insisting there is something important they must give her. Stuart bursts onto the scene, profoundly and breathlessly relieved that he made it just in time. He thrusts a package forward, fiercely desiring to give her a comforting taste of her memories for the road. He proudly presents a quarter cake, a staple mansion sweet baked with exactly equal parts flour, sugar, butter, and milk. She gently takes the nostalgic offering, preparing to experience the beloved flavor once more. Thrilled by the freshly made treat, she warmly thanks him and immediately takes a bite. A silent panel heavily emphasizes the profound emotional impact brought on by the familiar taste. Chewing softly, she fondly recalls how they all used to drink tea together while gazing out at the beautiful garden. A sharp pang of sorrow hits her as she realizes this is her final time looking at that beloved garden. The narrative pauses respectfully, allowing the heavy weight of her absolute departure to fully sink in. Overcome with immense nostalgia, she quietly confesses that leaving this place will feel incredibly lonely. Stuart solemnly agrees, perfectly sealing their bittersweet and unforgettable farewell. A solitary figure stands silently against the desolate backdrop, establishing a somber and tense tone for the inevitable departure. The visual narrative shifts quietly as the characters brace themselves for the heavy emotional separation ahead. An oppressive silence stretches across the panels, magnifying the profound weight of the impending goodbye. Lingering glances flawlessly capture the crushing reality of their permanently fractured world. she solemnly reflects on their irreplaceable time together before finally acknowledging the bitter end. Turning toward her intensely loyal servant Stuart, she solemnly declares that it is time to say goodbye to him as well. Bowing with immense humility, Stuart expresses his deepest gratitude despite viewing himself as merely an inadequate old man. She warmly reassures him with utmost sincerity, firmly stating that he has served her flawlessly all this time. A poignant stillness heavily saturates the air as the undeniable permanence of her farewell settles over the room. Stuart's weathered face softens with profound sorrow and appreciation as he quietly absorbs her final words of praise. Preparing for her dangerous journey, she earnestly entrusts Stuart to take careful care of everyone who remains behind. She strategically advises them to rely on His Holiness the Archbishop if anything happens, confident that he will be of help. Signaling her absolute readiness to face the unknown, she boldly commands Kurtz that it is time to go. Watching her walk away forever, a mournful whisper of, "My lady," tragically escapes into the freezing quiet. The heavy carriage door slams shut, physically severing her final remaining ties to the luxurious life she once knew. Bidding a resolute farewell, she urges them to take care as the carriage swiftly accelerates away from the estate. The scene abruptly shifts to a lavishly bright room where someone eagerly asks how a beautiful new dress looks. Claudia respectfully addresses her father and His Highness, proudly presenting her stunningly elegant appearance. Both esteemed men praise Claudia warmly, enthusiastically agreeing that the beautiful gown suits her perfectly. Claudia beams with blinding joy, fully soaking in the intoxicating admiration radiating from her powerful audience. Thrilled by the compliments, Claudia excitedly asks them to wait just a moment so she can model a few more dresses. His Highness turns to Earl Norrell, proudly stating that he is greatly looking forward to the grand day of Claudia's debut. Bowing with calculated respect, Earl Norrell assures His Highness that he is also very delighted by the upcoming event. Hesitating with sudden nervousness, Earl Norrell cautiously brings up a deeply troubling matter regarding the banished lady. Noticing the Earl's intense unease, His Highness sharply commands him to speak up about whatever is bothering his mind. Earl Norrell nervously reveals that one of his trusted servants spotted that lady heading straight towards St. Rainia Cathedral. Visibly surprised, His Highness speculates that she intends to rely on the church because she has absolutely no other moves left. A suffocatingly tense silence underscores the dangerous political implications of her desperate flight to the holy sanctuary. Arrogantly dismissing the immediate threat, His Highness declares it perfectly fine if she becomes a nun and never returns to the secular world. Analyzing the escape route, Earl Norrell deduces that she is utilizing the Reina Highway to reach the port of Corgia and escape by ship to the Marquess. He further reports the shocking news that she vacated the royal capital mansion and took the Knights of Mares down the highway. Stunned by this tactical military escort, His Highness demands to know if the knights are actually seeing her off. The tense conversation darkens heavily as they coldly debate whether they have done enough regarding her tragic situation. Realizing the massive legal loophole, His Highness angrily admits that the banishment decree probably will not reach her if she boards a ship. Bowing his head in immediate submission, Earl Norrell offers a strained apology for failing to prevent this unforeseen complication. Agreeing with His Highness, Earl Norrell notes that something simply does not add up about the unfolding situation. Dismissing the looming threat entirely, His Highness coldly orders Earl Norrell to forget about her and focus solely on the upcoming banquet. Realizing a crucial flaw, the Earl deduces there is no reason for her to escape the capital if she is merely relying on the church. Noticing her father's intense distress, Claudia immediately asks what is the matter. A heavy visual silence blankets the room as the undeniable weight of the looming political conspiracy deepens. Masking his growing dread, Earl Norrell silently admits to himself that he can only pray. Quickly waving off Claudia's concern as nothing, he desperately hopes everyone will be safe when the chaos finally concludes. A stark numerical sequence flashes across the scene, indicating the relentless passage of fleeting time. Shifting abruptly to the escapees, Kurtz openly admits he is impressed his sister managed to arrange things this far. Astounded by their smooth getaway, he eagerly questions how on earth she executed the flawless plan. She reveals her brilliant strategy of paying extra by giving away all the carriages they brought from the royal capital. Kurtz realizes that makes perfect sense, since the carriages were going to be discarded anyway and the captors could freely sell them afterward. An attendant firmly interrupts their private conversation by calling out to his lady. The visual focus shifts sharply to emphasize the massive scale of their imminent maritime departure. The loyal servant reports that luggage loading is fully completed and all personnel are on board, leaving only the lady and the young master. A sweeping visual pause highlights the bustling environment as they prepare to cast off. Praising his good work, she confidently declares that they are coming right now. Halting suddenly in his tracks, Kurtz calls out to his sister with a heavy, uncertain tone. The tension spikes sharply as the visual narrative forces a dramatic pause before their ultimate step. Staring intently at her, Kurtz warns that this is her absolute last chance if she wants to turn back. The cinematic focus lingers heavily on her stoic face as she absorbs his critical ultimatum. A quiet moment stretches between the siblings as the surrounding winds whip violently around them. Breaking the tense silence, she calmly admits she never thought he would actually try to stop her. Sensing a sudden shift in the charged atmosphere, a single questioning thought of hesitation hangs in the air. Fiercely glaring back, she sharply asks if he is the one who is actually hesitant. She firmly declares that she has absolutely no intention of obeying that man who slighted them from the very beginning. Revealing her ruthless determination, she boldly states she never would have sent out her trump card otherwise. Her terrifyingly confident expression perfectly cements her absolute and unwavering resolve to wage war. Snapping her stunned brother back to reality, she decisively commands Kurtz to go. Swearing brutal vengeance, she vows they will profoundly regret slighting the Marquis house because she will never back down here. Stepping forward with unbreakable conviction, she acknowledges that the arrow of their rebellion has already been loosed.